White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki nearly ran out of the room as a reporter shouted a question about The Intercept's bombshell reporting that showed Fauci lied about gain-of-function research. Let's take a watch.
Qualification requirements are not your party registration. They are whether you're qualified to serve and whether you're aligned with the values of this administration. Thanks, everyone.
And a follow-up on the story about Dr. Fauci yesterday in The Intercept, the documents released that shows he was unproven.
All right, well, joining us to talk about this is culture editor at The Federalist, Emily Jashinsky. So, Emily, how long do you think they can avoid these kinds of questions about Fauci and gain-of-function research?
Not much longer. I think the time is really out on that clock because and this has been really interesting, like the White House press corps, as I assumed they would do after going after Trump for every little thing, and the Biden administration to make themselves feel really cool and like great reporters, they suddenly enjoy peppering Joe Biden when things get tough, Afghanistan, whatever it is, and they suddenly do a good job again because they want you to think that they're actually very fair and balanced. So they will sometimes actually ask decent questions, and I think that's about to happen, but it's a matter of then the White House, how long can the White House get away with not having a satisfactory answer to that question? Because they don't. At this point, they don't. And when Rand Paul was questioning Fauci, Fauci did not have a good answer. What he had was a way to just sort of run out the clock and blather, with things that are like vagaries and allow him to just kind of squirm out of this conversation. And that's what they have, because this is a pretty black and white situation post-Intercept reporting. And that's where they stand right now. So the question is, what can they do? I mean, how long can they go without actually taking action when it comes to Fauci? How long can Fauci go without having any repercussions? That's the real test, I think, at this point.
Well, and how long can it go without New York Times, The Washington Post, CNN, news outlets that talk to Fauci all the time, that have him on constantly before they even reference the Intercept report? My understanding is, it's been radio silence in the last 24 hours. So that's the other part of this problem, right? Is that the media is going to give Fauci a pass for as long as possible.
Yeah, he's built up an enormous amount of goodwill with all of these legacy outlets because he comes on their shows whenever, they want. I'm sure he's fine for the ratings, and it makes them seem like they have a credible voice, somebody with inside knowledge who's willing to comment at 4 p.m. and 3 p.m. and 2 p.m. and 1 p.m. on MSNBC because he just is always on television. And I'm sure he's talking to the legacy media reporters behind the scenes, and he is. We see him quoted very often. So that means he does have an enormous amount of goodwill built up with them. And the question is exactly that, Robbie. It's like, at what point do they have to start connecting the dots from A to B, from point A to point B? Because, again, post-Intercept reporting, this is more black and white than ever before. It was fairly black and white when Rand Paul was questioning Fauci just a couple of months ago. At this point, it's just unavoidable. And people in the press, again, this is why I think the time is probably out. They do love to at least have this veneer in things like press briefings of being really tough and feeling like they're really fair. It makes them feel good. It makes them look good. And it helps them cover up more insidious biases that are under the surface. So I think there's something very theatrical about this question, and I won't be surprised to see it come up at a briefing. The question, to your point, Robbie, is when is there going to be, like, when is MSNBC going to start saying this is not a credible voice anymore because he's been caught in a pretty clear-cut lie? And when the White House realizes that those things has started to mount, that's when it's going to get really tough for him. And I don't have a good answer to that.
When he's accused of sexual misconduct is the answer we keep coming up here internally.
Yeah. That's it.
But what is the tripwire that takes it from the current situation, status quo, where you have the story is out there, everybody's talking about it online, everybody's kind of sharing it, but it hasn't kind of broken into the cable news or the front pages of the New York Times. Now, The Intercept, we have a follow-up story coming. Maybe that's the tripwire that triggers this into the next phase of it. But in your experience, what is the thing, or does it just take one person, standing up and asking the question, and then that question gets covered on cable news? Like, just kind of mechanically, how does this move into the next phase?
It's so incredibly stupid every time we have to go through this. And there are a million different stories that you can point to where Covington Catholic is actually a good example where there was this narrative that had built up to the point where it was almost impenetrable. And then as the facts started to come out, you see resistance to the facts. And then when one person, to your point, Ryan, I think that's the answer. It's like the New York Magazine story that, started taking the lab leak seriously. And then all of a sudden, nobody was referring to it as a conspiracy theory anymore. It's like you just have to have one voice in the political establishment and in the legacy media come out and say, we need to take this seriously and do it with research and all of that and good reporting and good writing. And then all of a sudden, it's not a conspiracy theory anymore. And I guess we can, and I suspect something similar is about to happen with Fauci because this is not sustainable for anybody. He has obviously lost his credibility. So I suspect it's just a matter of getting, that one voice to just sort of break open the dam. But it's just, to me, so stupid that we have to go through this because he's a public servant, he's a bureaucrat. We shouldn't have our political establishment just sniveling and sucking up to him constantly in a way that protects him from the criticism and the consequences of his actions that would better serve the public.
President
real
Biden,
news and real journalists would be scrutinizing, right? And they would be criticizing and kind of looking into this. But, the thing that really gets me about this is this isn't the only time Fauci lied. I mean, he has admitted to telling noble lies, and maybe he's going to try to paint this as another noble lie somehow. I don't know how you could kind of spin this one into that. But, why is this guy still there? He should have been gone a long time ago for the noble lies.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I think it's, again, because he's helpful to people in the media and he's helpful to people in the political establishment. And he's helpful to people in the media because he comes on their shows and talks to them. And I think that's like what it comes down to. And also, some of this is not even intentional and it's not even cynical and calculated. It's just when you build up, if you're a legacy media reporter, if you're a producer over at MSNBC, you build up this narrative in your mind or this image in your mind of Fauci, and you don't even realize your blind spots and your biases at a certain point because you just think, oh, this guy he's obviously good. He's an eminently kind and selfless public servant. All of this like right-wing chatter is conspiracism. And that's how you get into these situations where you can't change a narrative until you have one person who does serious reporting, who's taken, seriously, a capital VS, very serious journalist. And that's really why we get into these stupid cycles.
President Biden is set to give a speech today on the state of the pandemic. According to White House officials, Biden will push federal agencies, schools, and private businesses to implement vaccine mandates in an effort to curb the spread of COVID. Now, obviously, actually, the White House has been feuding a little bit with, they want the FDA to approve the booster shots and the vaccine for the under 12 population much faster. I've actually kind of enjoy, I don't know if admired is the right word, but enjoyed the level of the Biden people actually trying to battle this massive, slow-moving bureaucracy, which I am much less sympathetic to. But what do you think this is going to create further division if we're going even more steps further into coercively pushing vaccines on people? And again, I'm all for vaccines, but it seems it's going to have at some point diminishing returns to really, really, really just make people do it, even the holdouts.
No, I think that's absolutely correct. It is absolutely correct. And especially in this climate, I mentioned this a lot, but I think the first column that I wrote when the pandemic started was, this is going to be, in a climate where institutional distrust is as high as it is right now, we're in sort of uncharted territory undergoing a pandemic because the level of distrust in all of our institutions, it's going to create a situation that's untenable. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing happen with the vaccine because people don't know who to believe. And they're right to not trust any of the institutions that are telling them that they must take the vaccine. And what makes them trust it less is the coercion, is this idea that it has to be forced on them. It's the last thing I think that you want to do when people are distrustful of institutions and feel as though they're not being served, feel as though things are being forced on them, feel as though the government has ulterior motives. Suddenly forcing them to get the jab, as Dr. Fauci would say, yeah, that's probably the last thing that you want to do.
And that's why they're turning to private businesses to do it for them instead of the government. They're trying to encourage private institutions rather than it was. But either way, it's kind of the same result.
Yeah. Coming up, filmmaker and executive producer Michael Moore joins us to discuss why he was initially hesitant of COVID vaccines under Donald Trump and his trust in the science under Joe Biden when Rising returns.